Blessings, Soul family. I am so excited. Gosh, this has been such a long time coming, and how long it took us to connect for this interview, I really feel is an indicator of how powerful this interview is going to be. And not only that, but I also feel just the resonance in the frequencies that are here right now are just so much more powerful than they were a couple months ago when we tried to start this journey of recording this. So today, our guest is Lisa Wetzel, and she is a Akashic Records, I will say channel. I will let you kind of put your own words to that, but I will just say that she is really tapped in and doing some amazing work, and I just feel so honored to have you and to see where this conversation takes us. So welcome, Lisa, and I'll just have you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm kind of speechless too. I'm Lisa. I channel information from the Akashic Records. It's funny because it's, we get to this point where we are, and it's like, I don't even know how to describe who I am. I'm just a person who is lucky enough to get tapped into this beautiful Akashic field and have the ability to channel information. And so that's really who I am. I'm lucky enough to have a little YouTube channel that I like to have. I have podcasts on, which you were one of my beautiful guests. And the purpose of the podcast is to help people get exposed to different modalities and different forms of healing so that we can actually advance and let go of our pains, our hurts, our sorrows, our fears, and we can allow ourselves and understand the process of elevating in consciousness and getting happy, just getting to this place of happiness and joy, which is what I call the fifth dimension. My guides call it the fifth dimension. People don't like that term, fifth dimension, because they feel like it separates us. So my guide said, well, you're just moving to the institution of joy.
Yeah.
So we can just remove the fifth dimension and we're moving into this institution of joy. And those are the messages that I want to share. I want to help people to move into their joy.
Oh, it's so needed right now. And I love that, right? Because I feel like joy is one of those frequencies that when it's experienced in its purity is the essence of who we are. It's the expression of who we are on a divine level. So from there, really what I'd like to explore is kind of tapping in with whatever direction that your guides feel led is to really look at how we can use the Akashic Records as an evolutionary tool because I do know obviously it has a lot of different I don't want to put the word meaning there. It doesn't really resonate, but it has a purpose, maybe is a good word for that, and how we can use that purpose in our own lives. Because I know such a big part of uh, of having a tool like that is not always to rely on somebody else to be able to give us the information, but how we can tap into it for ourselves and use it as an empowerment tool. So I'd love to hear, let's just kind of start it there and see how the conversation goes.
Well, so first of all, people use the Akashic records in different ways. So I'm just going to give this perspective from my knowing and how I use the Akashic field and the masters and the guides and the teachers. And I use the Akashic records. I call it spiritual psychology.
Mhm.
And so the way that I prefer to use the masters is to help us to figure out why we're having the emotions, why we're having the energy that we're experiencing, why do we have the belief systems, why are we reliving karmic patterns, how do we evolve through those patterns, and where are we going? What brought up a specific energetic pattern in my body that created cancer? Where, how do we go back and we find this pattern in our history or even in the present so that we can see why we act the way we do, why we behave the way we do, why all of these events that transpire in our lives, what is the meaning behind them? And so what I found is that when I'm having a conversation with somebody, when I'm doing a one-on-one session, and they ask those types of questions, then it's very it's surprising, amazing. I'm constantly amazed and humbled because it helps. It's like once we can recognize that I've had this specific pattern in my life, oh, it comes from a number of different lifetimes where I've lost my voice. I've been held in suppression. And so in this lifetime, this is why I lost my voice. This is why I'm not heard. This is why I have thyroid cancer or whatever it may be. And it helps us to go back and to recognize that these are these patterns. And in this particular lifetime, we were put in the situations to experience these events so that we can break these karmic patterns, so we can recognize, oh, I was born to my parents and they were abusive or suppressive, because I had to recognize that I had to relive this so that in this particular lifetime I could break that karmic cycle, break that belief system, break that energetic pattern. And that's why I'm here, and that's what my experience is meant to be in this lifetime. So once we can I'm hearing the words follow the breadcrumbs,
Mhm.
then we recognize that it's almost like an aha moment. Oh, now I get it. Okay, well, that energy just dissipated. Now I recognize that I don't have to hold on to, whatever happened when I was 3 years old and my father told me I was stupid and locked me in my room.
Mm.
And oh, okay, now I understand why that happened. Now I see what that pattern was. So now I can understand how to let that energy go and no longer feel that my father did something that I should be holding on to. I can see it from a spiritual perspective. And when we can see things and events from a spiritual perspective, it helps us to get out of our minds. It helps us to get out of the stories, and when we can get out of our own stories, we can see the truth of what is, and we can see life in a completely different way. It's not the way that we've been programmed to be, but it's the way that it is meant to be, the truth of it all.
Mm. As you're speaking, something really interesting is happening. So, uh, just that story that you just kind of said, oh, it's like, oh, that's why I got locked in, or that whole little thing. So, what I started seeing was all these timelines collapsing into that one moment. And, but it was interesting because there was like almost two pathways that I saw opening up. And one was what you're talking about is like this perspective where they can let it go and kind of open up this new pathway. But interestingly enough, I actually saw another one where I don't know, I'm just going to say it for what it was. It was almost like, oh, now I know I am that way. And it almost becomes like a stronger identity in it. And so I'm just curious what happens in those times where people grab it as an identity instead of moving it into that direction.
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways, but again, when you start bringing it on as an identity, then you're moving in. It's the mind structure
Yeah.
that's holding on to it as an identity.
Mhm.
Because what happens is that when when we're beginning to elevate in our consciousness, what's happening is that we're letting go of these identities. We're letting go of the labels. We're letting go of the victimhood. We're letting go of all of these things that I was told that I was, or I created the belief system of who I am and what I am. And the way that my guides always explain this in a way of elevation, and I'm like a little escalator as we're moving up in consciousness, is we're decluttering our mind. And so the thought and the idea is removing labels. And the way that we've been conditioned to believe, for centuries and centuries, is that society, people are the ones who create the labels. They're the ones that say, this is how you have to be. This is the label that you're going to wear. You're a male, you're a female, you're fat, you're skinny, you're pretty, you're ugly, you're rich, you're poor. Whatever the idea is, we get a label stuck on us, and then our mind starts holding on to that label. We're the victim. I'm a child of abuse. Okay, so I am that victim, and I have that brain, that mindset, that I'm hearing set, mind set. It's set to create that as the identity of who I am. But the truth is that that's not who you are. It's an experience that you went through in order to shift or change in consciousness, or experiences in order to grow. It's not who I am. It was an experience. But we're conditioned to believe that that's who I am. Psychology labels us, society labels us, and so as we begin to really recognize that in this path, like you said, you have that core issue, and you have all of these little off roads or offshoots, and we all have the ability to take any path that we choose. We have this thing called free will, but that also changes, it can change the course or the direction that you take. I'm too afraid to let go of the label of being the victim, so I'm going to continue down the path of being the victim. So the things that I bring to me are going to be situations and experiences that put me in that victim mode, in the victim situation, until I recognize that I can shift that way of being, and then we go into these other different roads. But if I had this initial idea in that little timeline collapse that you saw, if I go the different route and recognize, oh, my father was playing a role, he was exactly who he was supposed to be. I signed up for this. He signed up in order to do what he had to do to me, so that I could recognize that I need to end this cycle. I need to end the energetic pattern that will keep this in my life. So again, you've got two roads, but very different. Am I going to stay in my head and stay in the victim, or am I going to choose the different path and be able to see that I can break this energetic pattern? And as I break that energetic pattern, I release it, and it won't happen again. Once you let go of that karmic energy, you can't go back to it. And the way that we're elevating, this is really where we are at this particular time, is being able to really look at everything around me has given me the opportunity to break these old energy patterns. When I choose to do it, it is elevating my consciousness, and it is not allowing me to go back into that heavy cycle or that heavy energy. I've cut the ties to it, and I'm free from it. Does
I,
does
it
that
absolutely makes sense. So I'm just going to show it on an energetic level. Kind of what I was seeing is you could see almost like particle form was the density of it. And then when the reading happens, also what I was seeing within the reading itself is that by tapping into the field where the it's read as information versus through the experience, it starts to break up the particles. And then in that it's breaking up the particles within the person in the body, and it almost becomes more of a wave form. And then within the wave there's the ability to make that choice to move into a new timeline, and then the particles are recreated within the reality outside of it. And that's why it's so hard to go back to what it was once that is recreated, because it doesn't even exist in your field anymore.
exactly right? That's and that's, it's so interesting because people don't really grasp that concept of being able to let it go. And once you let it go, you can't go back to it. It's not energetically possible. And so when we really recognize that we're doing this and we're elevating into this institution of joy, it's like once you get to the institution of joy, there's no going back. It's there. That's who you are, and that's what you exist within.
The question that's coming through is, and this is such a random question, so I will see what the answer is, but it was how to choose joy when there's other feelings that maybe are not of joy that are happening, because obviously it may be that that's one karmic pattern, but it may be that there's other parts of our of life that I would like to say that we don't prefer.
Uh-huh.
Little
Uh-huh.
events that happen that we don't prefer. And then, so what's the guidance in finding the joy or shifting into the joy pattern?
Okay, I'm going to let my masters, my guides, answer that, and then we'll build on it. Okay. What we want you to see is that every evolution that is transpiring within each individual is the soul's guidance. The soul is guiding the individual to have the experience that they need and it needs in order to break these karmic patterns. So when you find a situation that is not of the joyful nature, you'll begin to understand that it's time for you to look at the experience and understand why the experience is happening, and also be able to understand not to put the label on of joy or sadness or uncomfortableness. And it's so funny because I listen to people talk about good and bad. Oh, that was a good experience or that was a bad experience. It was just an experience. We as humans don't like anything that's uncomfortable. So if it's uncomfortable, then it's bad. Oh, that experience was fun. Yay, that was a good experience. Okay, but the problem is with us silly humans is that if everything was smooth and everything was happy, would we ever shift and change? Would we ever get out of this way of being? We would be limited. And so we have to have experiences that shift and change either the environment that we're in, or the way that we see life, or the way that we live our lives. And a lot of times those experiences are brought up in uncomfortable ways. Ending of relationships, ending of jobs. I'm hearing a flat tire on the side of the road. But whatever it is, we have the option of labeling it. And if we see anything that is uncomfortable is bad, then we're determining our feelings and our emotions. If you can look at a situation, and the easiest thing for me to talk about right now is just ending a job. So let's say that I was in a job that I thought I loved, but I really didn't love it. I convinced myself that I loved it. And so because I didn't really love it, but I just told myself that I did, then I compromised a lot of, well, even though I don't really care for the way that the people around me are treating me, I love what I do. But maybe what you do isn't really what you're passionate about. Or maybe it's something that you're compromising because you just need a paycheck. So maybe you actually weren't really fulfilled and you weren't really putting everything into it. So you get fired because maybe you're not living up to the boss's expectations, because the truth is that you really weren't that passionate about it. You really weren't heartfelt about it. So you didn't put your all into it. But you look at it as, oh my God, I'm a failure. He fired me because I didn't do this, or I wasn't good enough, or he's a horrible person because he fired me, or what am I going to do? All of the stories, all of the stories. But when you really step back and you really look at the situation, and you can look at it as a whole, but wait a minute, was that the ideal job? Or maybe I needed to end this cycle so that another door would open, and something greater or something that's going to take me to a different level is going to open up for me. The whole thing and the whole way that we look at anything in our lives is all up to our mind.
Mm.
And if our mind wants to create a scenario, then you can live in that story. But if you can recognize that you can pull away from the stories and look at it as an observer and be honest with yourself and really recognize the whole story and the whole scenario, then you'll be able to again to see it from the spiritual aspect of what it's really meant to be. And it'll help you to maneuver through, and it'll open you up to whatever's coming to you without holding you limited again to being the victim or somebody else was wrong and blah, blah, blah. All of the stories.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
It does. There was something else that was coming in about if we were happy all the time. And I think we just want to go back to that moment because within the question, it was then being in joy, right? And it was like, okay, well, aren't those the same thing? And I wanted to go back to that moment because I feel like what we perceive as happiness, especially if we're doing it on an emotional level of happiness, that it is that wave, right? And then we're always chasing happiness. But I feel like when we're moving into this higher frequency, the fifth dimension, into the joy pattern, it's that everything is just we're conscious of that there's joy in everything. And in that, we're creating a vibrational field of a reality of joy. But there's still, in that, especially when we get to that fifth dimension, that there's still a conscious choice in that. It's just easier to go into the highest frequency of choice. And where you're talking about in that if we were happy all the time, we wouldn't change, it's more that it's an unconsciousness of are we really happy or are we just living that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. There
Mm,
is a difference,
yeah.
and I feel the difference because I've 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 done enough work. I've done 30 years of work
Yeah.
letting go. Okay, but like what I guess I was referring to as happiness is, oh, I have the perfect marriage.
Mm,
We never fight. Everything is always going. We're always in agreement, and I have the perfect children and everything flows smoothly. And it's more or less that. And if you think about, there's this thing the Buddhists talk about suffering, and there is this point where if everything is status quo, then we're going to stay status quo.
mm,
Okay. But we also have to look at that is on the 3D dimension. That's the 3D way of thinking. So when we start shedding these ideas of this is the ideal family and putting that label on it, then you recognize that you're just living within the energy that doesn't get disrupted. And so, when we shed these labels, these ideas, these experiences, these beliefs, and we no longer feel like we have to have the labels applying to us, but we just are, we just be, then you are staying in that steady status quo of perfection
mm,
because your mind's not telling you anything that it's good or bad.
mhm.
And staying in the pureness of who we are. Now, with that being said, by the time you get to that level, you've shed off all the 3D stuff that's putting identities or labels on whatever's good or bad. And what I do know is that what I can say, speak for myself again, because I have done a lot of work, put a lot of effort into me letting go of these old things. And the way that I feel now, the way that my body feels, is that there's an energetic vibration that's within me that almost won't allow myself to look at something with a label on it.
Mm,
It's almost like I can't say that you're pretty or you're not pretty, you're right or you're wrong. It's my natural nature to see you as a human being and to see the love and the heart vibration. And this is where our hearts connect. That's where I can stay now. So it's more that you get to this place of recognized vibrational frequency without the mind playing the role of what I have to do and what would make me happy and what wouldn't make me happy. Now, I also because I tell my clients all the time, their question is, okay, we're in this transition phase of moving into our happiness place because we've lived for centuries trying to please everybody else. How programmed are we to believe that I have to sacrifice myself and make sure that all of you guys are happy? I'm living up to all of your expectations. You have to approve of me in order for me to have value. Okay, so we're moving away from that. We're moving into this place of my selfishness. of, well, wait just a minute. What makes me happy? What makes me happy? And that I don't want to sacrifice my happiness and joy to make you happy anymore. My life and my joy is not dependent on keeping you happy. What my life and joy is dependent on is me being happy, me doing what makes me satisfied, me fulfilling my own desires, my own path. And when we find that we can push away all of these external highs, these little hooks, that when we can pull all of these away and we can stand in the wholeness and the completeness of the I am all, I am one, I am, then you recognize that once again, you see things with different eyes. And you don't have these emotional ups and downs anymore because it's almost like, oh, now I understand why you're acting like that. Now I see why I had to have this experience. Oh, so it's almost like there's something that shifts and changes within us that we can stay in this consistent manner of happy and joy because our brain's not dictating the ups and the downs anymore.
You know
So
what?
it's
Yeah, I love what everything you're saying. So there was something that I was seeing as you were talking, and I have like two kind of like offshoots of that. So the first one is I love how you're like going into the heart resonance, and that's kind of how we're connecting. I just want to share something because I was just out visiting my family, and I spent the day before with my brother, and then we went for a hike the next day, and he was like, well, don't you notice anything different? And I was like, you shaved? I was guessing, right? He's like, no, I lost like over 30 pounds and I couldn't see it because I was just in that space. So I have that happen all the time where people are like, oh, I should cut my hair. And it's like, really? So I think that starts to happen where we
yeah,
don't identify in the
yeah,
physical because we're identifying in
yeah,
the frequency.
yeah.
And the question that kind of like was kind of coming from that is when we start to connect to that space of heart resonance, it also kind of alters the way that we have relationship because
Totally.
it's no longer, like you were saying, this happy little family. And I know for me personally, I'm kind of exploring what it is to start a new relationship from that place, and there is no up and down wave of the chemical part of connection. And I'm just
Yes.
curious how you see this evolving as we move forward and as humans.
It's so funny because this was a question that was just asked not too long ago about how will I can't even say it. How will relationships evolve?
Mhm.
And I think it's fascinating because what's so interesting is that I've had these visions and I've had this understanding that when we can truly get into our heart space and our brain's is not as active in the sense of the judgments and following the ideal relationship. What's the perfect partner? What do they have to look like? What do they have to do for a living? All of these things that we're so taught to. You got to make your perfection list, all of that. But the thing about it is that all that's what is going away. All that's going to be irrelevant. And when we get to the vibrational frequency, it's what I can see very clearly is that it's a soul to soul connection.
Mhm.
And it's actually going to even open us up more to these true heart, deep felt connections that we have with one another because we're not cutting off that soul. We cut it off here and we live from our mind. That's not going to be, it's the full channel. It's everything. It's our complete total knowing of who we are. And that's what's going to come through. Being guided more from our knowing and that internal dialogue that is given to us from our soul, from the soul's relationship, we're going to have deeper, more significant relationships because I'm not in a relationship for a superficial reason.
Mhm.
That's the only way I can figure out how to describe it. But what I also see is that in the future, with relationships, I see that I feel like what I have been shown and what I can really feel and recognize is gender identity is not going to be an issue anymore. I think that it doesn't matter if you're male or you're female, it's your heart. And it's bringing my emotions up. It's making me cry. It's the heart to heart. I love you because I love you. And it doesn't matter if you're male or female. And I really feel like we're going to become blind,
Mhm.
literally, in the sense of I have to have relationships in a certain way because this is what society says. Now, I'm heterosexual. And do I want to have a relationship with a man? And obviously reproductive reasons and all that. I don't think that that's going to change, but I don't think that the person that may be the most precious to me has to be a male. I
Mm.
think that the person that's most precious to me is because they are precious to me,
Yeah.
not because of what they look like, not because of where they live, not because of their sex or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's where we love each other from the soul perspective, from the energy perspective. And that's what we're going to be shifting and changing in the future. And it's already happening. I
Mm.
mean, if you really begin to look at, it's already happening. But the old structure, the old belief system is what's holding it in place, but it's also falling down.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really fun. I have two 20-year-old daughters, and it's fun exploring or witnessing, maybe is a better word there, of their navigating relationships. And I'm like,
Yeah.
gosh, like we weren't doing that until in our 40s, where we started having these deeper conversations and looking at the whole entire structure of what this union, even at such a young age, but also in from the very beginning. It's not something where they go all in on the chemical and then try to figure it out all later. Like they're figuring it out like within that falling in love phase, which is really interesting to witness. Um, did you have something else you wanted to say about that?
No, it's just it's amazing because I'm from the old generation. I'm 61.
Yeah.
And you think about growing up in the 60s and the 70s, compared to my strict structure.
Mhm.
My brother was gay and, he had to hide in the closet. And his friends, he lived a complete total lie because he couldn't be who he was. And you look at how we've evolved in relationships from the 60s to today and how our kids, the 20s, 30s, and younger, see relationships so differently than how I was taught to see relationships. It's so humbling for me to be able to witness love in
Mhm.
every single form. And it makes me so humble to be able to see the evolution and so thankful, that we can see each other heart to heart and not from the labels. And again, and it's just going to keep growing and growing.
I agree. And I don't know that we have to go all the way through the evolution of where that could take us. Maybe we'll do that on another podcast. But
We may be going down a rabbit hole
I
right now.
know, right? Because I feel like we could definitely, I mean, this is obviously a topic that has so many dimensions to it. And
Yeah.
I think the takeaway is that that heart connection is kind of just not in relationship, but in all aspects of life, that's where the joy starts. And I love it kind of deconstructing the way that our mind is operating and kind of opening up. It's not that our mind is no longer working, it's just that we're putting it more in that, what I would say, a claircognient state where it's only picking up on a pure form of energy or an intelligence. So we're moving from a mindset more into open, like divine guidance or intelligence aspect of. And is that happening in the mind? Probably not. I think it's happening in our field, but sometimes we make it feels like it could be our mind, and then bringing that into the heart. So from here, Lisa, is there something that you kind of feel guided that you would like to share today or bring through that I feel like we've been kind of all over the place, but I feel like that happens when you're in the field. It's what's important in the moment.
Well, I'm going to let my guides talk. if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Yeah.
They're saying what we want you to understand is that the evolution of humanity is consistent, and that it's ever evolving. And what we want you to understand at this particular time is that every human that walks upon the earth is going through a shift and a change on an energetic basis. We want you to understand that the mind is being deprogrammed so that the human can walk in the truest, purest form and find love in the most permanent, congruent way that we wish for them to love. We also want you to recognize that as the mind becomes deconstructed from the old patterns and the old ways of being, the human will find the heart to be more relevant and more trustworthy. What you'll find is that as breaking down the old beliefs, the old harm, the old fear, the old pains that the mind holds on to, the individual can trust the heart's guidance in a more prominent or permanent way. You'll soon find that the human nature will become more intertwined with the heart's construct, where individuals will become more all knowing and less integrated with the mind's thought processes. You'll begin to see that the divinity that lies within each human will become amplified to a way that it will not be denied. We also want you to understand that the human construct is evolving into a way of oneness and the wholeness and completeness of all things. This evolution is happening rapidly, and we are at an influx or an end point, IN, not END, end point, where the humans are transitioning more rapidly than what they have done in the past. This is a strong time period for each individual to look deeply within their own being and recognize how the mind controls their behavior and how the heart speaks to the truth. We want you to recognize that each one of you has the ability to tap into the heart nature and the truth of who you are if you choose to do this. And we're providing this option at this particular time. And this is the shift that humanity is going through.
Mm. So beautiful. I witness that. I feel that in myself, and I welcome it. It's interesting as I was just listening into the vibration, and I kind of went into like what it can feel like when, the mind starts to kind of break apart. And one thing that I've noticed, even personally, is the way that my mind is operating, right? So kind of moving more into that claircognizant state where it's just very clean. But then there's this other part where it wants to come in and be like, well, you're making that up. We all have this thing where it's like, oh, that can't be possible. And we want to downplay it. And of course, I've been doing this work long enough that I know what voice to listen to. But I just felt it was important to speak that because I know that that's one place where we trip up is that the guidance is always there, but there's this other part of us that's interrupting receiving the purity of that. And I just wanted to say, if you're experiencing that, it is normal, and to always go back into that heart space because it will inform the initial guidance and you'll feel it, right? And I think that's why we're moving into that feeling stage.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And, a lot of things that people don't really talk about becoming more intuitive.
Mm.
And they always want to process. And really, what it comes down to is just shut up and listen. Get out of your head. And that's what I keep saying. It's just like, just shut your mind off and listen. All of the answers are within us. How that gut feeling, that just inner nudge, that's something that gets your attention. We're constantly being guided and we're constantly being shown the way. But then our mind has to jump in and start analyzing. Well, what was that? Was that my head or was that my heart? What did that mean? How am I supposed to, and we just go into this tailspin from the mind. Stop. Just stop. And just really begin to listen to how does my body feel about this? And I've had these experiences so many times of, somebody wants to do something and it's like, okay, well, I'll do it because you asked me to. And then there's something inside of me that's like, don't do it. Don't
Mm.
do it. Don't do it. Yeah, but no, it'll be fine. I have a second ex-husband because I was listening to my head. side of me was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I'm like, yeah, but he loves me. And he's the only one that's ever going to love me. And I have to be married because that's what everybody thinks that I'm supposed to do. And again, I didn't listen to everything that was inside of me that was saying, "Oh, why, this this is one of those branches that you're choosing to take. You're
Yeah.
living in your free will, and we're trying to tell you not to go that way, but you didn't listen. So you're going to get your bell rung until you get back on the path." But but I've learned because I've done this enough times.
Yes.
It's into my head to where I am at this point now. Wait a minute. Don't jump on the bandwagon just because everybody else is doing this. No. And you need to do what's speaking to you. And the thing about it is that we also have to train ourselves. Listen, 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 and and really learn to trust that inner knowing. And that's part of this evolutionary process as well, because this is what we're going into of learning to live here instead of here, but we're so afraid to trust.
Yeah. You know what I'm
So
seeing? In your same thing, girl, same thing, and so feel you there.
I know I'm not the only one.
No, definitely not. And in so many places in our life, and it is because going back to kind of something you said a little bit earlier, that we were so trained to make everybody else happy, right? And then part of starting to listen to the heart is to follow the happiness or that inner joy, and that isn't always going to make everyone happy. And what also I think starts to happen is that when we shift from living that way to this way, a lot of times that when we start choosing this, these other aspects of our life start to crumble and it can be uncomfortable. And that's going back to that place of allowing things to be uncomfortable to get to the place of joy. So there's so many different aspects of that. But I will say that the more that we practice it, the less of that starts to happen. And we do start to feel more of that joy pattern or the fifth dimension. And then things seem to drop out. Like if they come in and they're not supposed to be there, it immediately is an interference and it'll drop out. And if that's something that we have to choose for it to drop out, or they just organically drop out, but it's never. At that point, we're trusting it. We're like, yep, that just wasn't supposed, that wasn't part of my joy pattern.
Yeah, 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 and and again, we're also not putting labels on the good or the bad. But when we have something that is it's time to crumble away, then we're more in the understanding of um, being able to understand why it has to fall away.
Yes.
And a lot of times when like if a relationship is ending, well, when we're looking at some kind of a relationship that's ending, again, whether it's a job or whether it's a friendship or whether it's a romantic partner, when we start finding that these things are falling away, the first thing that we jump into is this fear. What am I going to do without this?
Mhm.
Well, when we start, I mean, and that's just one aspect of all of the different dynamics that go into it. But one of the things that we learn as we start elevating is, wait a minute, I don't have any fear anymore. Let's just see what happens. Let's just go with it, and we'll see what new doors opening, because we all know this old story: when one door closes, another one opens. How many of us can talk about experiences that, oh my god, I thought this was the worst thing in the world for me and it ended up being the best? So it's really that point of being able to be more open to all the opportunities that come to us, in which, again, the more that we can see clearly and the more that we can be open, that's when the magic starts. That's
Mhm.
when you can start seeing all of the synchronicities. That's when you can see, oh my gosh, this person crossed my path and this is what door they just opened. Oh my God, thank you, universe. Yeah, I know you're taking care of me. Thank you guys for showing me the direction that I needed to go so that I could stand next to this person that's creating a whole new opportunity for me that I wasn't even aware of. And if we start looking back at our lives, we can really start recognizing how these synchronistic events happened to bring us to where we are today. But we don't necessarily have that hindsight when we're staying in our heads. But when you can really start being being quiet, and you can look at, how did you and I begin to have this conversation today? Well, let's look how far back it had to go. In order for me, I had to go to massage school in 1990s. I had to get a divorce from number one, go to massage school, find a new way of living in 1996, and then how all of these different steps to here we are in 2025 to where you and I are having a conversation. So when you start really looking at how each thing falls into place, and at the time it may have been felt horrendous, or you didn't understand why it was even happening. Why did I go to massage therapy school? I didn't have any idea, but wow, it sure has had a big impact on me now, you
Mhm.
know. So as we begin to be still and be quiet, then you can look forward and you can see all of the signs. You can see how everything's being put in front of you. You can see how all of the pieces are falling together for you. And we surrender to understand that I'm going with the flow. I'm going to be that leaf in the river that just goes with the flow, and the universe is going to take me exactly where I need to go without pushing it, without forcing it, without trying to control it, but just being.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny because every time I hear that, uh, this happens every single time. But within that flow, there's going to be times you have to make a choice because because there are those choice points. And I think that that's an interesting thing because learning where we're choosing from, I feel like is such a valued thing. And that's when going back to that heart space. Because what I have found is there's actually a lot more no's than there is yeses when you have, just the experience of life. It's in each moment, there's a highest timeline, and that's only one yes, and there's a lot of different timelines, and it doesn't mean that they're good or bad, but there's one that's most in resonance. And that's where, when we learn to live from, is this the most in resonance, that we start to find that it kind of gets more narrow and more narrow and more narrow, and there's not as much interference. And that truly becomes the miracle pattern, is what I call it.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Hmm,
absolutely. Yeah.
so beautiful. Is there anything else that you would like to share today, Lisa? This has been so amazing.
Uh, well, it's it's such an interesting time because so many people are trying to find their way
Mm.
and trying to figure out, well, right now I'm really suffering. And, either I have an illness or relationships ending, or I don't know what direction that I'm going in. I feel lost. I feel like I'm spinning in circles. And, you know, I think that the most important message that I really want people to understand is that number one, everything is perfect. Everything is perfect. And again, it may not feel perfect because of the way that our mind's perceiving things, but everything is exactly as it's meant to be. And we're perfect. And regardless of you feeling like you're imperfect, this old saying of nobody's perfect, yeah,
Yeah.
you are. Yeah, you are. You're perfect. You're perfect exactly as you are, and you're doing everything that you're exactly meant to do, whether people understand it or not, whether you understand it or not.
Mm.
This greater force that's around us understands exactly where you need to be. So the more that you can get quiet and the more that you can really start tapping into this heart and let the stories go, the more that you're going to see that you're safe, that you're protected, that you're guided, and that you're divinely loved, and that you are perfection. And the more that you can get quiet and the more that you can sit still, you're going to know exactly what direction that you need to go, and all of the answers are going to come to you. You can't help it. It's just going to happen. Everything is just going to fall into place for you. But the more that you resist, the more that you try to control, the more that you hold on to the past, the pains, the fears, the more that you hold on to these old conditioned belief systems, the harder the transition is going to be. But the more that you can get into that flow and the rhythm, life is amazing. Life is a wonderment. And even in the most simple things, just taking a breath every day. I'm just glad that I can breathe. I'm glad that I have clean air, that I can breathe in and I can feel my lungs expand and I can feel my heartbeat. What a miraculous thing. And honor that. I honor that. I honor the ability to be able to do this. I honor the ability to be able to share this information with you and with whoever can listen or will listen. And when you can really start seeing that you as a human are miraculous, you're a gift to all that is. We are all playing a role in this shift in consciousness. And it all begins with me being able to recognize how miraculous I am and that I am perfection and that I have a plan. I have a team of guides. I've got an army of guides that are taking me down the path so that I can live my purpose in this particular lifetime and that I can share love in the most beautiful ways and I can see the love in others. And to me, when we talk about being happy, when I can look at somebody and I can feel that love, that makes me happy.
Mhm.
And when we think about being able to be in an environment that you can see that heart, that love, and connection to every single person around you, when you're sitting in a restaurant, you're going to the grocery store, and you can feel that, is that not joy? Is that not love? Is that not happiness? To me, it is
Yeah.
because you're in the purity of all things.
Yeah.
That's the real definition of happiness and joy to me.
I'm there with you, girl. Yeah, that was beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. Well, I know there's people that are going to want to connect with you. Give you a little shout out for how you would like them to connect with you.
You can go to my website. It's lisawetzel.com. And I've got all kinds of stuff on the website. I do offer private sessions, one on one sessions, and you can go to the website and you can schedule a session there. And that's lisawetzel.com. And I'm saying this because people have trouble spelling Wetzel. Wetzel is Wetsel, not Zel. So it's spelled a little bit different. And then on social media, Facebook and Instagram, but also my YouTube channel is Lisa Wetzel, Akashic Records Consultant. And that's where I have my podcast where you, Jules, has been a guest and it was a fabulous conversation that we had. And also podcast and a bunch of other different information there as well.
Beautiful. And I'll also put those links in the show notes. So if you're driving right now, it's okay. It'll be in the show notes. Well, thank you so much. And I also want to thank your guides that came through today and the messages that both came from your heart and through you and through your guides all just so life changing, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me be here and share this information.
My honor. And we just thank everyone for listening. We are just sending you all so much love and a great big hug until we meet again.